So it's my great pleasure to introduce Skye William-Eade, who's going to talk to us on the Dyslexic Sublime, exploring the art-making process of dyslexic artists through the lens of the sublime. Thank you, Skye. So I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name's Skye William-Eade. I'm a third-year PhD student at London Met, and I should formally acknowledge the presence of my supervisor, excuse me, Dr. Jacek Ludwig-Skarso. The title, I'm here to present part of my PhD research on dyslexic artists like myself. So the title being of my thesis so far is The Dyslexic Sublime, Exploring the Art-Making Process of Dyslexic Artists Through the Lens of the Sublime. My PhD research is practice-based, which involves the development of my work. So based on the review of my literature then, I've come across the area of the visual spatial as a strength for dyslexics. Dyslexics have an increased sensitivity to visual stimuli. More recent studies have found that dyslexics have increased emotional sensitivity, which can be great if you're a dyslexic artist because you see things other people don't, but you also feel things that other people don't. Another area in the literature that I've looked at is mind wandering. Dyslexics have a preference to let their minds wander when producing work. Many dyslexics will recall the experience of school, of staring out of the window, looking at trees like I did, mind wandering, daydreaming. Brock Eide found that dyslexics do this 5 times more than the non-dyslexic. Michael Gabalis, professor of psychology, in his research into mind wandering, states there that it's something very useful and a source of creativity. Another area that I've looked at is the mind's eye, which all of you will probably be familiar with, or some of you. Thomas G. West states in his book there, in his book, The Mind's Eye, of spatial reasoning, holistic thinking, gestalt sensitivity. So there's this ability for the individual to create mental imagery without prior sensory input. So this research has caused me to formulate my research questions then. The overarching one being, as viewed through the lens of the sublime, in what ways does the experience of dyslexia influence art-making practice, specifically regarding perception? How does the experience of discrimination, stigmatization, and marginalization shape the sublime in art by dyslexic artists, viewed from the perspective of transcendence and otherness? So my methodology then is qualitative. I worked with a cohort of 21 dyslexic artists. So I really explored the lived experience. I'm using arts-based research. More specifically, the methods in relation to the workshop I'm going to discuss with you were focus group discussion, thematic analysis, and reflexive documentation. The area of the sublime in the arts is my theoretical frame for analysis. So here is an overview of my workshops I conducted. So they were with the cohort of 10 of dyslexic artists. Each one was an hour and a half long, and there were 3 of them. So essentially then, I asked the dyslexic artists, the cohort of 10, to draw their eye from their imagination, then from a photo, then zoom in on the cornea, and then finally from their imagination, draw their eye in water. So this was interspersed with focus group discussions and mind-wandering exercises. So the first theme then, from my analysis of the data from the workshops, was that participants recounted classroom trauma. Being in a workshop is akin to being in a classroom for them, many of them. So this was triggering, and they felt constrained in exploring their artwork. BD describes feeling really vulnerable when doing the drawing task in the workshop. He describes an urge of wanting to run off to a corner and be on his own, whereby in time he would have found a solution. Many dyslexics will relate to that. The sort of experience of, instead of being in a noisy classroom and with a teacher who might not understand that we don't all learn the same way. So my second theme then, conformity versus freedom to explore in art making. Participants talked to feeling stifled, sense of rigidity when drawing from life. Many were in agreement that drawing from imagination is preferable. They felt more free to explore creativity and individuality. They complained of feeling restricted if they were asked to conform, what they called conform when drawing from life. They called this a prescribed way of being creative. For example, participant FN, in her drawing there, she says, "I gave up trying to make my brain do what it was told to do." So this is a collection of those different thoughts. So what she's done there is all the tasks, she's put all of it on the paper. The eye on her device, the eyeball in the glass of water, and the patterns of the water. So that's her way, which is a very dyslexic way of thinking, going back to the holistic thinking and sort of gathering everything together so she could understand what it is she's trying to do. She says it started to sort of melt as well, which shows leaning towards preference for using her imagination. Right. Theme 3, uniqueness of perception and interpretation. Participants described their experience of looking at the eye from life and how this differs from imagining it. They speak of an uncanny experience of feeling drawn in and a weird feeling. Participants have different interpretations of the workshop tasks. In addition, through their art making, they feel safe in the belief that their language of art allows for this flexibility of interpretation. For example, participant SM, poet, said, "Got to let them be free, that's why I can do poetry. I can just let my mind go." Participant JB talks of barriers. She says she understands it differently, that's why I'm doing it wrong, which relates to the classroom trauma of failure, But through her art, she's making it beautiful. So through her art, she's able to transcend those feelings and solve the problem. ZS Sculptor, another example. He depicts the glass and the vortex and relates that to the cornea of the eye, which again shows his ability to, or preference of using his imagination and sculptor's eye. KT Painter talks of swirling his glass of water over a photo of his eye and being fascinated by the pigment of his cornea and the way it would shift and warp and morph. BR participant describes her drawing as seeing through a veil of water. Again, preference for the imagination. Further example, DB, photographer, talks of his eye being full of life and movement, swimming around in the water. You can see in his drawing there, very creative, imaginative drawing. These were only 3-minute drawing tasks, by the way. And theme 4, self-belief as transcendent experience. Painter NM states it's down to belief in your abilities as a creative. So he's developed these skills throughout his life as an artist because towards. So what he means is he struggled because he's in this classroom type environment where he's got to do tasks, but he succeeds by his strengths that he's developed as an artist, the visual spatial. He put his eye quite literally in the glass of the water, imaginatively. There it is refracted in the water. Another example, digital artist LV describes drawing his eye from in 3D. So the drawing on the top is his eye in water, that's why it's all swirled and morphed, and below he describes depicting the cornea as inside like a river. He also talks again of the uncanny experience of seeing his eye and in another dimension. Oops. So when I started my PhD, I sat in the British Dyslexia Association conference, and a leader in the field, Professor John Stein, spoke of superior perceptual abilities of the dyslexic. This caught my attention, so a few years later I made contact with him and asked him if he could elaborate on that. So he talks about superior detection of symmetry and sublimity, because they, the dyslexic, see more of a complete picture in one glance than others do. They're also faster and more accurate at identifying impossible figures, which would account, he says, why dyslexics are usually drawn to the arts. And he states that there's enough evidence to quantify this scientifically rather than it being anecdotal, this link between dyslexia and creativity. So this caused me to create a new angle on the sublime, and I proposed to call this the dyslexic sublime. So the concept of dyslexic sublime refers to the ways in which dyslexic artists can harness their unique ways of processing information to create works of art that lean towards the sublime. Dyslexic artists use their creativity, intuition, and innovation to transcend their limitations and create alternative forms of expression. Dyslexic artists can create works that are both intensely personal, universal in their appeal, due to our experience of marginalization, discrimination, and stigmatization. The dyslexic sublime serves as a useful framework to understand the unique ways in which dyslexic artists engage in their material and convey their insights. It can provide a unique framework for the acknowledgement and celebration of the unique strengths of dyslexic artists and the way in which we see the world or perceive the world. So, in summary then, framing the work of dyslexic artists through the sublime can be a useful lens through which to understand their work and their unique contributions to the art world and the creative process. By emphasizing the sensory and emotional dimensions of our work, as well as the exploratory and iterative nature of our creative processes, the sublime provides a framework that captures the complexity and richness of our artistic vision. By embracing the lived experience of dyslexia, artists can create works of art that are uncanny, transcendent, and lead towards the sublime. The dyslexic sublime can be a new lens whereby we can appreciate and understand dyslexia as a celebration of our unique strengths and recognition of our contributions. Here are my references. Thank you, and please ask questions.
Thank you, Sky. Thank you. I hope you didn't feel too traumatised there.
Well, a little, actually.
There was a lot of information there. So thank you very much for that absolutely fascinating insight into the dyslexic experiences of becoming